My name is David Newberry. My wife and I and our two kids placed membership here a month or two ago. And one of the things that when I met with the elders and Terry mentions it all the time, he said, when we placed membership, he said it's time to go to work. So Wednesday night, I'm sitting in the back, and Jeff May comes and sits with us. And I thought that was kind of weird because Jeff always sits in the center of the room. And so after the class, I'm just kind of sitting there talking to Mike and a few others, and Jeff goes, can you teach a class? And I was like, yeah, sure, And we had talked about maybe the college class as a starter. And so, and I said, yeah, sure, anytime. And he goes, what about Sunday? And I said, yeah, I can teach a class on Sunday. That's no big deal. And he goes, oh, no, this Sunday. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. I said, where? He goes, in here. And I was like, all right. So, and then he goes, and next Sunday too. So you have me for 2 Sundays. I'm going to tell you right now, this is really my first ever real adult Bible-led class that I've ever done. I'm excited about it. It's something that I've always wanted to do and want to continue to do. And so hopefully the message will appeal to you. And maybe you can skip the presentation. Maybe the presentation is not going to be good, but hopefully the message will be. My last little story I'll tell, and I've made sure that I have covered all my bases in this. There was a new preacher came to town. He was in a bigger church. He was really happy. He was kind of prideful. He was like, man, I have made it. I've got my church. I'm ready to go. And he gets up and he gives his lesson, and it's just a great lesson. He says, he thinks, man, I hit all my points. I was enthusiastic. I used the correct presentation. The remote didn't fail. I mean, he was just on fire. They sing the invitation song, and then after the invitation song, he sits down. And as he sits down, he realizes that his zipper is undone. And so after the service, he fixes his zipper, and then he goes to his wife, and he goes, why didn't you tell me my zipper was undone? And she goes, oh, don't worry about it, honey. Nobody saw it anyway. So hopefully I've checked my zipper. My shirt is buttoned correctly. I have the buttons are all correct. So hopefully we'll get through this. What I want to talk about today is Elijah. So when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, there's really 3 stories in the Bible that I really like, that really mean something to me, in the Old Testament at least. And that's David and the giant Goliath. Obviously that's me. I also like Samuel and Eli when Eli said, God is speaking to Eli, and Eli goes to Samuel and he says, just tell him, here am I. That one has a lot of meaning to me. And the last one is Elijah. And I like Elijah because he is bold. He is not afraid. He knows who his God is. He knows what he's supposed to do. And he knows that if he asks for something, he doesn't really even ask. He says, Lord, this is what I need. And that has a lot of connotations for us as we live this Christian life. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the book today, in the Bible. And so we're going to start off, the story of Elijah starts off in 1 Kings 17:1. Now Elijah, and I will also tell you that I am no scholar in words. I'm barely fluent in English. So if I just skip over some words or names, that's the way from saving myself embarrassment. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Galilee, or in Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except by my word. So let's go back a little bit and figure out who Ahab is. If we go back to 1 Kings 16:29, starting in 29, in the 38th year of Asa the king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omar became king of Israel and reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omir did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. That's important to remember. He not only considered it trivial to commit sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, but also married Jezebel the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidonians and began to serve Baal and worship him. And he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than any of the kings before him. So Ahab and Jezebel are extremely wicked. They have basically they have sanctioned Baal as a state-sponsored god. There were Baal temples all over the northern kingdom. Now, we're not going to go too deep in this, but understand that we're in about the 9th century BC. If you consider that Adam was around 4000 BC, we're about 2,900 years into what we know as the Bible, into the historical record. And to be called the most wicked of all times is really saying something. Apostasy was everywhere. Like I said before, there were Baal temples everywhere. There were Baal statues, Baal necklaces, Baal charms, Baal ornaments. It was throughout the kingdom. Now also understand that when we talk about gods or deities, it wasn't just Baal. There were hundreds of others. Anything that you wanted to worship in this time, you could worship. You could maybe you make a little figurine, or maybe it's whatever it is. It could be. There were gods. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of different gods and temples and things that people worshipped besides the real God. At this time, Elijah was the dominant spiritual force in the darkest days of the Israelite nation. Many thought that Yahweh would just disappear altogether. There was no need for him. They had the gods they needed. And so to be a follower of Yahweh was really something, it was abnormal. It wasn't the standard protocol in this day and age. So you might say, well, why did Elijah or God choose Baal? Well, Baal just so happens to be the god of the sky, the god of weather. So what Elijah is doing in this case, and what God is doing, is they are literally spitting in the face of Baal and saying, you have this weather god, and you say that he controls the weather, he controls the sky. Guess what? Not happening. We control the weather. We control the sky. So they are going directly after Baal and his prophets in this drought that they're about to start. Elijah is showing Ahab that he serves the one and only true God. Not only did Elijah prophesy the drought, but he also made it happen. Elijah means Elijah means my God is Lord. And the warning that Elijah gives in 17:1 is the same warning that is given in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 by Moses. We often think of people like Elijah to be very special, to have some kind of something extraordinary that we don't happen. And James tells us just the opposite. In James 5:17 and 18, Elijah was a human being, even as we are. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. When we look at Elijah, and this is a question, what do we see that Elijah's faith was rooted in? Any takers?
Say it again.
What was Elijah's faith rooted in?
He had a faith in God. He knew God was here, God was in control. And when he talked to God, he knew God would answer.
Exactly. He knew that when he says that as the Lord our God of Israel lives, he is saying that he has a living God, that we have a living God. And before whom I stand means that the God I serve is more powerful than yours. One thing that that really impresses me about Elijah is his prayers. I was raised or taught in the church that we should come to God very humbly, that we should minimize ourselves. You know, we are a very sinful culture, that we have no right to be in front of God, and just very minimal. And I'm not saying that any of that is bad, but we also do ourselves a disfavor when we pray like that. The Bible says that we are a little higher than the angels. Our relationship with God should be very personal. And so when we pray, when Elijah prayed, he prayed with boldness. He was unafraid. He was not concerned with offending someone. He prayed to a living God that was more powerful in heaven and on earth than any other king there was. And we can take a lot from that. So when Elijah prayed, he just said, you know, here's what I need. You know, give life to this kid again. You know, don't let it rain. So again, the way we pray and what we expect, and what Elijah expected, is an example for us. A very similar presence, or a very similar statement is we find in Luke 1:19, where Gabriel says, "I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God." When we go to verse 1 Kings 17:2, and the word of God came to Elijah, "Leave here and turn westward and hide to the Kenneth ravine east of the Jordan, and you will drink from the brook that I have directed ravens to supply you food there." So he did what the Lord told him, and he went to the Kenneth brook east of the Jordan and stayed there. And the ravens brought bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. This drought that we see in verse 1 was a significant threat to the northern kingdom. And we're going to see in just a few minutes that not only did it affect the northern kingdom, but it also affected the areas around the northern kingdom. In Ahab and Jezebel's mind, the reason that there was a drought was because of Elijah, obviously. And their thought process was, if we kill Elijah, then the drought goes away. We don't have to worry about it anymore. So that's why God sends him. Now, an important thing, this is another thing that we're going to see throughout this story. When God said go, Elijah went. He didn't say, well, you know, I don't think, you know, I'm famous. I mean, I've stood before the king. I've told him it's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. You know, I'm having a good time. I'm on television. I'm on Facebook. I've got my picture plastered everywhere. No. God said go, and Elijah went. There's a lot to be, what God was teaching Elijah is that there is value in the hidden life. Too often times we get caught up in what's going on. And as you know, Psalms 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God, and I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on earth." The only time that we really hear God is when there is silence. We don't hear God when we're blasting the radio down the interstate with the windows rolled down. We have all this noise and external things going on in our lives. We don't hear God then. We only hear God when there is silence. I've listened to a podcast, and it's two guys, and they go through the Bible and they talk about the Bible. And one of the things that they do is they lead groups every other year to Israel and to the Bible lands. And one of the things they do is they take about 30 to 50 people every other year. And one of the things they do is they will take this group of people They will take them to the desert. They will drop them off for the day, and they leave them. And then the evening comes, they come back and they pick them up. And they say, what did you learn? And every one of them will say, I found God. And the reason they found God is because everything else in the world no longer exists. They don't have a phone. They don't have, they're not sitting beside each other. They can't see each other. They are separated. And they have the opportunity just to focus on their Bible and prayer, and that's it. And that's often in the most harshest regions of our lives, that's where we find God. And wouldn't it be nice if we could find Him every other place? We see examples over and over in the Old Testament and the New Testament where Jesus, 40 days and 40 nights, all by Himself. There is something to be said about finding God in our deserts.
Okay.
Yes.
I know it's somewhere in the Old Testament, and I can look it up and maybe tell you later. But I think it was. I'm thinking it's either Hosea or something like that, where he said that he would take her, Israel, into the wilderness and speak to her there, speak softly to her there. So I remember when I saw it, I said, man, that's good for those of us who go through those wilderness times.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're closer to Him. That's where He draws us and He speaks softly to us.
Absolutely.
And I'll look that up for you.
1 Kings 17:6. Now I will say this. So Elijah, we don't really know anything about Elijah. He comes onto the scene. He's in the Bible for 2 chapters and he's gone. Maybe 3. Actually, it's 4 because, he's in the Bible from 1 Kings 17 to 2 Kings 1. So that's how long his life was in the Bible. That's all we know about him. We don't know his parents. We know where he's from. He was from Tisbe. If we look at where he was from, it would make him a Gentile. But the things that we're going to see in the book of Elijah, or in 1 Kings, will make you think that he's an Israelite. So, we don't really know. We're going to assume because of the way that the Bible puts certain things that he is an Israelite. But the opposite of that could be very much that he is a Gentile. So, it doesn't really matter in the story, but it was something that kind of threw me off for a little while, trying to figure out who he was. And really where we start to see this is in verse 6. And the ravens brought bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Is a raven clean or unclean by Jewish or Hebrew standards? Clean or unclean animal? Unclean. It's not only unclean, it's very unclean. It's like the most unclean animal there ever was. A raven goes and scavenges stuff. What do they scavenge? Dead animals. They get blood on them. They get skin. They get, all this bloody, gutty stuff all over them. And it makes them the most unclean of unclean. And if you are an Israelite, like we're going to assume in this case that Elijah is, and God tells you that I'm going to feed you by a raven, what's your first thought?
No thanks.
No thanks, exactly. But Elijah has 2 choices. He can choose to eat the food that the ravens bring him, or he can choose to die. And what this boy, and obviously he chooses to eat. And this goes back to this thought of that, I'll make sure I get this in my notes right. It's talking about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And I'm often reminded when I hear something like that of when you'll hear on the news or something where somebody is arrested or is picked up for shoplifting, and the cops come and they kind of do an interview or whatever, and it turns out the person stole like a can of beans and a loaf of bread. Well, is that shoplifting? Absolutely. Should they be put in jail for it? By the law? Absolutely. But the spirit of the law is different. The spirit says, look, they were stealing food. You know, they've got 3 kids at home, don't have a job. You know, all these different things are going against them. So let's do something for them. And so instead of arresting them and putting them in a worse place, the police or whoever buys them food and takes them home or takes them to their house and tries to help them out. That's the spirit of the law. And so oftentimes in the church we get bound up by, well, it has to be like this. There's no other way, the Bible says. But there's also the spirit. And so Elijah in this case is going by the spirit of the law. Yes, it's unclean. Yes, I should not be using it. Yes, I could not enter the tabernacle. I could not enter the temple. I could not do any of that stuff because I have eaten from something that is unclean. But God said, I'm providing you something, and he took it.
Sometimes God's blessings comes in ways we don't expect. And sometimes what seems bad can actually turn out to be a blessing. We don't need to limit God.
Yep. And one of the things that I had here was God may bring good word through an unclean messenger. So you're exactly correct. Matthew 10:41 and 42, whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anybody gives a cup of cold water to one of the little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. Spirit of the law. The ravens were faithful. Now, we can discuss about, why the ravens were faithful, and do they have a heart, and do they have a brain. You know, the brain of a raven is about the size of a pea, and that's probably being generous. So they're really only set up to do one thing, and that's to go find dead things and with their beak, pick at them. That's what they do. That's their only purpose in life. And in this example, God took a raven who has very little no brain, is programmed to do exactly one thing and one thing only. And that raven, or ravens, gave up of themselves. God put something in them that they would give up themselves for somebody else. And that really that really comes back to us of getting out of our comfort zone and doing things that we maybe didn't necessarily think we could do or that we would do. And if God can do that to a raven, well, then he can certainly do that through us. During these 3.5 years, God was teaching Elijah. And I'm sure Elijah had other ideas, but he trusted God. Another interesting thing, and I've seen this not here. Like I said, I've been in the church a long time. But we often want to teach people everything before we maybe talk about baptism. Or we want to, we got to start at Genesis and we got to go all the way through Revelations. And if you still believe at the end of that, then we'll baptize you. Or, in some denominations, well, I want to be baptized. Well, we only do that on the first of the quarter. And that's not what God anticipated at all. You are a child. You start somewhere. A lot of times, for a Christian, the baptism is just only the start. It's not the end game. And so when it's very easy for us as Christians. And when I was in sales, my first sales job, my first sales deal, I was calling this guy, and we were talking and talking and talking and talking. And finally, he said, "When are you going to shut up and sell it to me?" And I said, "Here's the invoice." And oftentimes we do the exact same thing to people that we're talking to the Bible about. We just keep on and keep on and keep on. But and we're trying. We got something that we want to sell to them, and we're just fired up for it. But we have to remember that there are steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if we do that, then like God did to Elijah, he's leading him down a path, and we're going to see that path the more that we go through this story. 1 Kings 17:7, and after a while the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. When we talked about in verse 1 how Elijah made the prophecy. He made the prophecy and then he made it happen. In this case, he prayed that he would have no water. Now, who does that? Nobody does that. Some of the commentaries that I looked at talked about, well, did he pray every day for no water, or did he was it a monthly prayer, or was it how did Elijah over these 3.5 years, how did he say no water? And when he looked at his brook, he's like, I would be like, well, can we just have like a little thunder shower right here so I can have some water? The brook dried up, and that was it. There was no more brook. In our life, God will bring us to many drying brooks. Elijah has felt the drying brook of popularity. He was famous. Everybody knew who he was. He was a household name. And from verse 1 to verse 2, God said, go. Go out to basically the desert, or at least a very arid land. Go lay by a brook, and you're going to be fed by ravens. But God said, go. John the Baptist, much the same way, was preaching, had his own baptism, had his own word. He was paving the path, was thrown in prison, and was beheaded for a party favor. The brook of dying popularity. There's the dying brook of health. As we get older, things don't work as well. My 9-year-old has a backache. I'm like, honey, it's going to be a long life. But we lose our health. There's things that we can't do that we used to be able to do. My dad is 86 years old. He's in Atmore, Alabama today. They live in Mobile, and he goes to Atmore, Alabama every Sunday to preach. 86 years old. Now, my mom drives him. She probably shouldn't be driving him. They're going to watch this, and he's going to complain about it. That's all right. But he goes. Now, he can't get out in the yard and mow the grass anymore. He'll call me and say, hey, the grass needs to be mowed. And I'm like, all right, send my sister. But he can't do the drying brook of health, the drying brook of money. I'm reminded by a story, and I'm not going to tell any names. I'm sure some of you might know this person. He had a real nice boat, and the church had come. I got ahead of myself. The church came to him and they said, "Hey, we need a van. Our van broke down. The kids can't go off to youth camp." And he was like, "Well, I don't know. I got to put 2 motors in my boat." Well, these motors turned out to be Rolls-Royce motors. But guess what? He got his motors, and the church got their van. But oftentimes, that is the bubbling brook of money. But oftentimes, maybe we don't come to church because we can make $2 an hour more, or $5 an hour more. Or maybe we're trying to, do something else, and, money is important, and, the money's not going to be there forever. There's something else that's going to be more prominent than money. The dying brook of friendship. Whether our friends leave us or we leave friends because of what they did or who they are, or maybe they pass away or whatever. There's all these different things that God leads us through of these dying brooks that we have in life. So what are some takeaways for that? Well, our God is a jealous God. And if God removes these gifts when we don't use those gifts to glorify Him. So I could have a great job, making tons of money, but if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that job just kind of goes away. Or maybe the sales stop happening. Or maybe bigger bills come up. And we've all faced that in our lives. And whether that's God's intervention, I kind of think it is. I don't have really any biblical connotation to say, hey, here's scripture and verse that if I don't give 10% every week, then I'm going to get 10% less the next week. It's not in the Bible. But whether it's the way the world is set up or God is, doing His things, I believe in an active God. He was active in the Old Testament. He was active in the New Testament. Why isn't He active today in our lives? One of the things we're talking about, one of the notes I have here is maybe Elijah should have prayed for a little rain to fill the brook. I said that already. And you know what? It's hard to pray for something when it affects you. I'm often reminded, my dad taught at Freed-Hardeman College for about 5 or 6 years, and we used to go, I was probably 5 to 10 years old, and we would go to lectureships there every February. And one of the, again, 5 to 10 years old, one of the ministers, or one of the teachers had this, taught about something, I don't know what it was, but he talked about Lord come quickly, praying for the Lord to come quickly. And when I was a kid, I would say, Lord, come quickly. I'm ready. Let's do this. I got to go to school tomorrow. I don't like school. Come get me. I'm ready. I was baptized at 7, so I'm ready to go. I became a teenager. Well, kind of hard to pray. Lord, come quickly. I got a football game on Friday. Don't tell my wife, she's sitting right there, but I have a date on Friday. And by the way, she would have been like 7 years old at the time, so it's no big deal. It wasn't her, and I couldn't have dated her. I would have if I could have, but I'm sorry, honey. And then when I became in my 20s and 30s, I was a little bit more rambunctious. And I was like, oh, Lord, I'm in a place, don't come today. Maybe in a couple of years come, but not today, I still don't know if I can pray, Lord, come quickly today. Now, I feel like I'm more prepared, but I also want to see my 2 kids grow up. And I also want to see, I want to see my 2 kids grow up. And I want to spend the rest of my life with my wife. So that's still a hard prayer, Lord, come quickly. But that's the way that Elijah prayed, because he knew that God was with him. Verse 8. And then the word of the Lord came to him, go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. And I have directed a widow to supply you food. And he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there picking up sticks. And he called her and said, would you please bring me water in a jar so I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. I have tried this on my wife, and it doesn't work too well. So it's definitely something that this is God inspired, this woman. Now let's talk about this woman for a little bit. Number one, she's picking up sticks. Now, it was not uncommon, obviously, for a woman to go pick up wood for a fire. But she wasn't picking up firewood. She was picking up sticks. That's all she had. This lady is the poor of the poor. And so she doesn't have anything. So we're going to see this a little bit later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But she is the poor of the poor. This is it just doesn't get much worse, much more down the line. She is a Gentile. He is an Israelite. There was obviously, someone talk about racism, Gentile and Israelite, that was pretty big. They would go around the area, and God sent him to Zarephath, knowing that, and not only is it in Zarephath, this is also Jezebel's father's domain. So he's sending him from one fire, he left a fire to the brook, and now he's back in another fire. And I know Elijah, if I were Elijah, I'm thinking, all right, we're on the move. God's going to send me, point me to this widow, and she's going to have money. She's going to have a swimming pool. She's going to have all these nice things. They're going to have servants. They're going to wait on me. I haven't eaten very well. I've been having to eat from ravens. And what does God do? Sends him to a poor widow. The other thing that's interesting here, just like God did something to the ravens to make them to forget what their purpose in life was, and to serve somebody else. God did the exact same thing to the widow. Now you could say, well, it was just convenience or luck of the draw that she was out there, picking up sticks. All right, you could think that, but I can guarantee you that if God had said, woman, I want you to go and pick up sticks, and when you're picking up sticks, there's going to be an Israelite come to you and say, bring me some water and bring me some bread, and I want you to do it. I can tell you if I had been the widow, I probably would have not picked up sticks and, mailed it in for the day or whatever. God touched this woman in a way that she didn't even know. Again, an unclean messenger serving someone for the purpose of God. The other thing that I will say, just a little information here, is that from the brook to Zarephath is about 200 miles. They didn't have cars. You couldn't call an Uber. He might have had a horse or a donkey of some sort. It doesn't say that he did. So I'm guessing that he just had to walk it, with everything that he owned, which probably wasn't much, but still had to walk through a desert. I mean, we're in a drought. We're in a drought that's lasted at least 3 years, if not a little longer. And so he's walking this 200 miles to go visit someone because God has sent him to go see someone that he's never met before in a country that he doesn't really have any business going to. Verse 12, and it's starting to get a little better here. And as surely as your Lord lives, she replied, and that's important, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home to make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. She doesn't know who Elijah is. She doesn't, she's probably never heard of him, but she completely respects and honors his God as saying, as the Lord your God lives. Now remember, she's a pagan. She's one of those that would have worshipped a Baal or an Asherah or whatever it was. She's a pagan. She is not, there's no reason to think anything different about her. It's entirely possible that she has never heard of Yahweh. And then, like the verse says, all she has is flour, a small amount of flour and a small jug of oil. And that she is going to cook her final meal and they're going to die. And you can just see the pain in this woman. And you're thinking, what is Elijah thinking? Well, we see what Elijah's thinking in verse 13. Don't be afraid. Go home and do as I have asked. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. And she went away and did as Elijah told her, and there was food for every day for Elijah and the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. You know, the first thing that he really says as a prophet is, do not fear. She acted more like an Israelite than a pagan. If you know anything, and obviously you do, if you know anything about the Israelite nation, one of the fundamental things was hospitality. You see it in Lot, you know. Two guys come to his house, people surround the house, and Lot says, I'll give you my daughters, don't hurt my guests. You know, we see over and over again, I think it is Abraham and Sarah, or Abram and Sarah at the time. A couple of people come up, angels, go fix some bread, go kill a calf. You know, that was an all-day event. That didn't happen just, I mean, you have a wood-burning fire that you're cooking a loaf of bread on. I don't know how long that takes, but I can guarantee it takes more than 45 minutes. This was an all-day event. Hospitality was huge in their culture. And for a pagan, she did everything by faith. She spoke her, you know, what I can say is that she listened to her heart. She didn't think about it. She just did it. And everything was going great. She had oil, she had flour, she had oil, she had food for herself and her son and Elijah. Verse 17. And sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and he grew worse and worse, and finally stopped breathing. And she said to Elijah, what have you against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Give me your son, Elijah says. And he took him from her arms and carried him up to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on a bed. And then he cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even to this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? And then she said, and he stretched out himself on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. And the Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. And Elijah picked up the child and carried him from the room into the house. And he gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. And then the woman said to Elijah, and now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. There's a whole bunch to dissect through this. But, you know, we have sickness and we have death. She's a widow. Her entire future is on this boy. If she has any future at all, it resides in him being able to work and being able to support her. It doesn't get any more desperate than that. And the fact that the boy dies means that her entire future is gone. She has nothing to live for. And you can see the pain, or you can feel the pain that is in her voice through this episode. I can imagine that Elijah had to pry the boy from her arms, and he takes him upstairs, and then Elijah is, you know, emotional. God, why did you do this? Why did you kill her only? Why did you kill the boy? Why did the boy die? I find it funny. This is the first time that we see that there is a life being brought back into a boy, or into anybody at this point. That this child has been resurrected. And so Elijah, there's no book on how to bring life back to somebody. So Elijah lays down on top of him 3 times. If he'd only done it 2 times, would it have worked? Or 4 times, would it not have worked? I don't know. Elijah didn't know. He's playing this all by ear. But, the other thing is that this woman, she blames Elijah for the death. She blames his God for the death. But she really blames herself because of that untold sin. And obviously in her mind, the gods have to be against her. She has no future. Verse 20. And then he cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, you have brought tragedy even to this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die. And he stretched out himself on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. Elijah's prayer was raw. It was raw emotion. But also we see in this, Lord, you know who I am. I know you are real. And Lord, I know you can do this. Verse 22. And the Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy returned to him, and he lived. And Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house, and he gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. And the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that your word of the Lord came from your mouth is truth. What really strikes me about this part is that we are is the part that now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord in your mouth is true. Elijah had been with her for some period of time. He probably played with the boy, maybe went out and picked up wood instead of sticks. Maybe helped her clean or whatever. Maybe told her about God. They had an intimate friendship. I mean, he's living in the upper room. He has to come downstairs to do everything that he wants to do. He has to see her. And they had this relationship, and sure, she knew that, he was a man of God. Sure, I take him at his word. But it wasn't until something that touched her heart that made her realize that his God was real. The connotation for us is, I don't know what the connotation for us is. I know that as a church in general, and I'm talking about all churches of Christ, and really all churches, I guess you could say, we all do things, we all have missions to go out and help people. And I'm reminded of a situation that I was in a few years ago where the church we were at was giving away food giveaway, and one of the men of the church was like, "It's not working out. It's just not working. I mean, it's great that we're giving food, but we have no Bible studies and nobody comes to church off of it. We haven't baptized one person off of this food giveaway in years or ever." And I was like, yeah, that's right. I mean, I didn't say that, but I'm thinking, yeah. And other people are like, well, we're helping the poor and we're giving food away and we're doing a good deed and we're giving them a flyer that says, hey, come to church, and we're doing everything we can do. But are we really doing everything we can do? It's great that we fed bellies, but we still have people going to hell because we didn't put anything in their heart. And this is the exact example of what Elijah had done. Under the best intentions that he had ever had, we never ever touch. If we don't touch the heart, then we haven't done anything. I'm not smart enough to know what that means or how to fix it or what to do. But the only thing that I know we can do is having relationships and being there when people need us and doing more than just handing out a meal. You know, maybe when we hand out the meal, we go and sit with them and talk to them and take it home. But there has to be more than just handing out the meal. There has to be something else to that. I don't know how much time we got. 5 minutes. I haven't heard Beth. We got 5 minutes. Good, because I'm just about done. People don't know how much you care. Let me say this right. This is by Teddy Roosevelt. People don't know how much you know until they know how much you care. Chapter 18, verse 1. And after a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain. Go. God said go. You know, he's in a pretty comfortable place. You know, he's probably still famous. Elijah is. He saved a boy. They're in a town, so, you know, he's probably famous. He's got on his Facebook page. They've had the reporters come out. Again, fame. And God says, go. And so he goes. 85 miles is what I calculated. Elijah did what God told him to do, and he didn't question it. Again, God leads Elijah step by step. And remember the process. He goes to Ahab and says, not going to rain until I pray for it to rain again. And then he leaves. 200 miles. Sleeps by a brook, is fed by ravens. Brook dries up. God says, go. He goes to probably the worst, next to the worst place that he could actually go, which is Zephapor. And then lives with a poor widow with nothing. That's got to be a disappointment. But he stayed. And then the son dies. Never faced that problem before. Brings life back to the boy. Again, famous. And then God tells him to leave. So, without question, God is leading him step by step. We'll try to throw this in. I love that. This is we'll probably come back to this next week if you let me come back. 1 Kings 18:2. So Elijah presented himself to Ahab, and now the famine was severe in Samaria. And Ahab summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Now, Obadiah is a great guy. I love Obadiah. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. And while Jezebel killed off the Lord's prophet, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hid them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through all the land, the springs and the valleys, that we may find some grass to keep our horses and mules alive, so that we do not have to kill off any of our animals. It's probably a pretty bad drought when the king is looking for grass. I'm just saying. So they divided the land, and they covered. And Ahab went in one direction, and Obadiah went to another. And it's getting good now. And as Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. And Obadiah says, what have I done wrong, that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as your Lord, the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or a king claimed that you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you want me to go tell my master, I can't paraphrase there, and say Elijah is here? I don't know what the Spirit of the Lord I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here, he will kill me. And Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, who I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab." Obadiah, is a righteous man. He has done everything that God has asked him to do and probably more. He saved 100 prophets of God. He brought them food. That's no small, and we would assume that it's been three and a half years that he's done this, maybe even longer. But Obadiah is like, look, you have a habit of just leaving. Something, you go raise Cain with the king, and then you leave, and then I have to deal with it. And we have looked for you and looked for you and looked for you, and nowhere to be found. We even made people swear that they didn't have you, they weren't hiding you. And now you want me to go and tell the king that you're here? How do I know that you're just not going to leave again? And then I'm going to die. So I think what we'll do is that's where we'll leave it off. We'll start next week with 1 Kings 18, verse 16. I appreciate your attention. Hopefully my zipper is still up. And hopefully I was able to bring a message that you can use in your lives this week and ongoing. Thank you very much.